Since 2019, California, and Santa Anita Park in particular, has implemented many safety initiatives covering both racing and morning training. Instrumental in the adoption of these initiatives was creating a culture focused on the safety and welfare of the horse, which was predominantly driven by horsemen. Here to discuss the development of this culture are Dr. Dionne Benson, Chief Veterinary Officer of First Racing, and trainer Tim Yakteen.
Thank you. So I promised Tim all we were going to do is have a conversation. So, in 2019, as was indicated, there were a lot of fatalities. I will say I did not start my job until March or May of 2019 and was not involved in Santa Anita in 2019 until March. I can recall sitting in my office in Lexington and thinking, oh, they had another fatality. That's too bad. And it was really kind of a their problem type situation. Can you talk about what you were experiencing during 2019?
Yes. So during 2019, when we were experiencing the unfortunate breakdowns, it became, you became very self-aware. You almost didn't want to associate yourself being part of the racing industry. Not that, we were embarrassed about it, but we were concerned about it, but the public had put a microscope on us. And we were just in the media daily.
And I can recall as we got involved, we had to meet with the governor, we had to go in front of the legislature, we had to go to Dianne Feinstein's office in Washington, D.C., all to plead the case to be allowed to race. So as we started in 2019, we had a bunch of fatalities, and then we took a pause, right? First closed the track for racing, we did some training, and thinking it was all weather related and that was the issue. Then we reopened, and I can recall very distinctly having a horse break down live on television when Bob Baffert was doing an interview. So that's obviously not an ideal situation to be in. So when I was called in, the goal was really to change the rules and modernize the sport. So as we went through this process, we changed a lot of things. And I say we, and I don't mean First Racing, I don't mean the CHRB, I don't mean the trainers, I mean all of us together. We realized as a group that the sport needed to change. So one of the first things we did was to change the medication rules. We decreased the level or the allowable or stand down time for intra-articular injections, decreased Lasix, increased the time to administer NSAIDs. Can you talk about how that has impacted or did impact at the time your practice?
With it coming into play, you thought, well, this might be a bit of a challenge, but in all fairness, it really hasn't changed anything. And from my daily routine, it's a very standard routine that pretty much our transition was very smooth, and it's just a matter of that. It's another I that you need to make sure is dotted and another T that you want to make sure is crossed, that you're staying within the guidelines that are set forth.
And as those changes progressed and went on, when HISA came into play, how did that further change, or did it further change how you?
Fortunately in California, when HISA came into play, nothing changed for us, at least to my recollection. I think we were within the HISA guidelines, and I think HISA almost relaxed some of the guidelines that we were working on.
Yeah, I think with the intra-articular injections and fetlocks, which will be changing back soon. So and also I think one of the other things that we really focused on was medication for works, right? So training had largely been an unregulated event. No one told you when to train, how to train, what medications you could use. So do you feel like that had a positive impact in how you were looking at your horses?
A positive impact on how I was looking at my horses. The question is, was I using medication beforehand while I was working? So in my barn, it really didn't change.
Right.
I continued my same routine as I had done before. So it was a very easy transition for me. But I do think that we can look at the results and see the progress that has been made.
Yeah, and so the other thing that we really focused on is veterinarians, right? Having vets at the track, on trackside, having vets in the barns that represented the association. So talk to me about before 2019 and now, how often you're seeing association vets, how often they're looking at your horses, things like that.
Okay, so association vets have made the biggest change in my eyes, especially the way we do it in California. We apply for our workouts in advance. It gives the association vets an opportunity to look at our horses prior to their workouts. Our association vets are very prevalent, very visible on the racetracks, positioned in different areas. So they're continuously watching horses train. They're seeing the trends of our horses. And I think we can see the results.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see, and in my personal opinion, is the more times we can get hands on a horse, the better. I mean, we've done something like 45 or 5,000 exams since September 1st when we reopened the track, and on something like 3,000 different horses. So it's really, to me, getting a baseline, getting more information. And, I noticed Tim Parkin's slides and talking about the different steps, and the one that it always frustrates me that he never has veterinary exam on there, because we do so many veterinary exams in California, looking at these horses 2 and 3 times between races, because traditionally it had been, you would see your regulatory vet when your horse was entered to race on race day, and that was it. And, seeing these horses between, I think we've had the opportunity to see things sooner, and especially looking at them on the track, I feel like we've had the opportunity that even your private vets don't have, because they don't have time to go stand on the rail to see how they look, if they look different under saddle. So, we have horses that what we call get flagged on track. And so then we call up the trainer, or we'll call, Tim and say, hey, we saw this horse, what's going, we're going to come check it in the barn. And I will say that when we first started this, there was pushback. I mean, not from your barn, but certainly I'm sure you heard rumblings across the backside of people who thought we were telling people how to train.
Yeah, I would say there was pushback. There was, as a trainer, you might feel that there's a lack of confidence that you're doing your job. And the one thing you have to understand is that we're also looking at our horses continuously with our attending veterinarians. So it's not that, horses will change overnight. We've all experienced that. There's no doubt about that. One day to the next, you're looking at a completely different individual. But the continuous relationship, I feel, is very important with your attending veterinarian and your association veterinarians, and having that open dialogue of where your horse is at a current time. Yeah. Okay. Many times association vets might only see that horse at one point, and they may feel, this horse didn't look like he was traveling the way I would expect him to be traveling. So phone calls made, the dialogues had with the attending veterinarian trainer. You look at the horse, horse looks fine today. Maybe he was off the bridle, or, I don't know exactly what you saw. Or yes, the horse isn't traveling exactly the way we saw him yesterday. Something might be developing. Let's look into it.
Yeah, and so I think for us, we also relied a lot more on the attending veterinarians. So previously there had been no requirements about exams, and now when we started this, we required pre-work exams and pre-race entry exams for all horses. In 2019, that was codified by the CHRB a couple of years later. And so not only were we mandating that we were going to look at your horses as association vets, but your private vet had to be in your barn on a pretty regular basis, especially given the work tab in California and how often people work. You're almost having your horses checked by your private vet once a week.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say, most of us in California have a workout pattern of once every 7 to 6 days. And yes, our horses are looked at by our attending veterinarians at least once a week if they're on a regular schedule. If if not more. I mean, obviously, we're looking as a stable. You're looking at your horses continuously,
Right.
daily. You're trotting them up continuously. So,
Yeah, do you feel like for you, and I'm sure you had your attending vet in your barn regularly as far as doing exams, but do you feel that that attending vet check is a good kind of weekly update on the horse? I mean, I always find that if you're watching a horse every day, changes that are very subtle can slip by because you're like, oh, it's just a little different, and then it becomes a little more different, whereas someone's looking at them a little bit less frequently, they may see something that you just have become blind to.
I think there's some validity to that. But as a horseman, anytime you see a change, you're always a little concerned because you want to know exactly what you have going on. It would be, at Santa Anita, we're very fortunate. We have 3 different modalities, when it comes to scintigraphy, PET scan, MRI, and we literally walk from our stall to the nuclear facility. It's a 2-minute walk.
Yeah.
And our appointments are easy. We are fortunate to have the Dolly Green Foundation, Southern California Equine Foundation. Our costs are substantially less than what you might find in other jurisdictions. And it's just a much easier way of just, walking them up there, and it's the convenience. And so we do take advantage of that quite frequently. And, when you have a subtle change, you don't want to fly blind. So we have those, and we'll just make an appointment. And granted, there's a cost involved, but you can't put a price tag on the other aspect of it.
Yeah, it's hard to put a price tag on safety, right?
Yeah.
We learned in 2019 that fatalities are not only expensive, they risk our very industry. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we were all very concerned that we wouldn't have racing for very long if we kept going the way we were. So you talked a little bit about work signups, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the program, we actually require trainers to sign up 2 days ahead of time before a time to work. And everyone's been talking about this analysis that we do of risk factors. We go through and analyze risk factors for every horse that is going to work. So we actually have someone who physically goes through and uses part of our computer model and goes through and gets some of the the interarticular injection information, some of the diagnostic information, and creates a risk profile for every horse and sends a list to our examining vets on the track. And they go through, and that's how we end up on your doorstep is, if your horses, for example, stumbled out of the gate in the last race. That is one that always makes me very nervous, and it goes to the top of the list of horses I would like the vets to look at. I will tell you, it is the one thing in Santa Anita that I get a lot of pushback about is trainers don't like to sign their horses up because they don't know exactly when they're going to train. And, we do give a little leeway as far as if you're going to have to train a day early because of rain, please call us, we'll check the horse. If you're going to train a day later, that's fine. We've already had the opportunity to look at the horse. How do you feel that has worked overall?
Overall, I think Santa Anita has been very willing to work with us. It does become a challenge at times, especially with the inclement weather. Like when we have to pull them forward, it puts a bigger workload on the association vets because if you're pulling the work forward, 9 times out of 10, they want to see your horse trot up. Mm-hmm. Generally, if you just sign up, if you fall in the bracket that they want to watch them trot up, that's, they have time to do that. Yeah. So, when we have storms rolling in, it becomes a challenge at times. But it's a very workable program, and it's just part of our routine now.
Yeah, and you mentioned increased access to advanced diagnostics. I mean, I think we do about 200 PET scans a year is the number I get, and that's probably more than anywhere in the country. And we're using a lot of that information, and I think it very quickly became a very reliable tool for us because, you start out with the tool and you don't know what the data means. And now I think we have a very good handle on how to use those scans and either decide to move forward with a horse, back off, or stop, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think those things, as we get those things adopted more broadly, it will be easier.
Yeah, I was very surprised at the learning curve that's taken place with the PET scan, very much along the lines of the nuke scans. We've been fortunate enough to have a nuke scan on site for, gosh, I think it must have come in the 90s when we first started getting nuke scans. They were invaluable for shoulders for us back then, whereas the PET has been just invaluable on fetlocks.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that I would certainly try as an industry to strive for, is trying to find those centers for these groups of diagnostic equipment to live that are close to a lot of racehorses, right? And in order to give easy access to it. The nice thing about the PET is you can roll it on a van, and as long as you have a nuclear medicine license at the site, it can go anywhere. So we should be really utilizing that at large training centers and tracks, in my mind, pretty consistently. All right, and then the last thing on this slide is we do provide some support for injured horses. And so I'm gonna think, yeah. So we actually, when we started this, I heard a story from an equine medical director that said there was a horse, not at one of my tracks, that was euthanized because it was lame, and all they ended up finding was a hematoma, a bruise. It had come out of a race lame, and no one ever radiographed it, no one checked anything. So one of the first things we did is just require that if there is a single limb close injury, we get a radiograph. We make decisions slowly. I think our feeling is we can stabilize these horses, make them comfortable in the short term, and really make much better, much more informed decisions. As opposed to standing by with, euthanasia and immediately euthanizing these horses when we don't know everything. Did you see a change in how we were addressing these horses? I mean, we tend to take them right to the hospital instead of right to what is colloquially known as the blue room.
Right, and obviously, as you articulated, to make an informed decision then versus making a decision just with what you're seeing in front of you. And so, I'm a big fan of diagnostics. I do a lot of diagnostics, but having that information and being able to act upon the information that's in front of you is always in your favor.
Yeah, and for me, as long as the horse, you can make them comfortable and stable, they're not suffering, we can, do the right thing. I always feel like euthanasia is a pretty permanent option. So so we did start, and I'm going to click this, performing fetlock arthrodeses. When I started in this position, we were still having some biaxial sesamoid fractures, and that was still our largest issue. And so we started to look at, I guess one of the first patients I had as an intern was a Derby horse that got injured and had a biaxial sesamoid fracture and then was given a fetlock arthrodesis. And so it was very much the norm to do these for horses that were high value stake and stallion prospects, mares that had great broodmare residual value, but there was a disconnect with whether it was the appropriate thing to do for other horses. You want to talk about that from your perspective?
Well, as we were chatting earlier, I completely agree with that. How can you save a particular procedure for one bracket of horses and not the other? And so from my standpoint, as a horseman, I think if the funding is available and we can provide an opportunity, those horses should be granted that opportunity to be repurposed.
Yeah, and so what we did was we essentially said we're going to set up some parameters. The first was the horse has to have a 50% chance or better at success, and our success measure at that point was pasture soundness. Will it be comfortable to be let out in a pasture like any other horse? If it has a 50% chance or better of that success, then we try, and we try to encourage the horsemen to perform the procedure. I will say there was a lot of resistance to this, for sure. I think people remember fetlock arthrodeses from 20 years ago where the horse was limping and uncomfortable and miserable the rest of its life. And, it was constantly on pain medication. We've done 24 of them at Santa Anita and San Luis Rey in the last 4.5 years. We have 16 horses that are alive because of it. This is Buzz, who got hurt in the Breeders' Cup Friday. Obviously, you can see he is getting turned out. He is happy. And so he is 8 months post-surgery. So that's not a bad result to have him walking pretty well. This is what the surgery looks like. It is complicated. This is another horse that got hurt last fall. You can see he is walking happily. He gets turned out. When we first started this program, one of the biggest concerns we had was, now we've got a bunch of horses, or not, fortunately not a bunch, but we've got horses who have injuries, who have significant hardware in their legs. What are we going to do with them? It has come to the point where this horse, for example, I tried to adopt this horse. Someone beat me to it. I mean, and he's a lovely, cute horse, and he is going to be someone's trail pony. So we're not just getting pasture sound horses. And I'm going to show you this last horse. So the horse up on top, that horse was one of our first fetlock arthrodeses horses. He is now a pony horse in Southern California. And he is actually owned by one of our veterinarians, and she is going to do dressage on him. He's not perfect, but he's going to pass a dressage jog. I mean, so these horses are going on and they're having careers and they're having lives that go far beyond what we ever expected. And so now our goals have completely changed for these horses. And I would say that one of the things that has really changed, and one of the advantages we have, is these horses get surgery at Santa Anita and they walk back to their stalls. And they're not hanging their heads in a corner. They're not in pain. They are usually bright at the front of their stalls, looking for treats, begging to be pet, looking for attention. So I think it was really a learning curve for the trainers to see that the fetlock arthrodeses that you thought of 25 years ago is not what we've done today. And full credit to Ryan Carpenter, who is our surgeon, because he has taken the fetlock arthrodeses from 25 years ago and improved it and really learned. I mean, they do the surgery in 2.5 hours and the casting is off the horse in a week. And then they are walking around. And, they are out of intensive care in usually 3 months, and they can be sent to an aftercare. We do track every one of these horses and make sure they're okay. But I know, you as a trainer, if you have a horse that is injured and you see that there's the potential for them to get surgery, how do you make that decision?
Well, I rely on my attending veterinarian, and if the horse has the opportunity to be successful and with a recovery and have an afterlife, because we're responsible for their aftercare, we move forward. But if the outlook is bleak, then it's the old way of.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the fair thing for the horse. I think one of the things we have done very well at Santa Anita is to really pull the attending veterinarians and the trainers into understanding that these horses can have second careers and lives beyond being injured. But I also think we've been very careful to not push when there is not a good chance of success. I mean, we're not in the business of trying to make horses stay alive just to keep our numbers down. And I will tell you, this certainly has kept our numbers down, but not nearly as much as you might think. So where are we now? So it's 5.5 years later. As far as, I will ask you this, when we were going through 2019, did you have your neighbors, your friends asking you what was going on?
Yes.
And
going to Starbucks, you just wanted to slip in and slip out. Yes.
Yeah.
You didn't want to talk about it. My career, my daily life, I was feeling like it might be twilighting. There might be a change in California. California is obviously very progressive, but it progressed in two ways. The changes that took place were and is something that I'm very proud of with the success that we've achieved.
And so now, do you get those same questions?
No, now I'm back to my normal day.
You don't have to sneak into Starbucks anymore, which is very important, I understand. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the way everyone feels. I had an admin who was a very good friend of mine at Santa Anita said, I'm worried in 2019. I don't know whether I'll have a job. And now I think, we're all trying, as far as the safety aspects, I think we are on very good footing. And to see just the opinions of the average person change. And, I think we're even seeing a lot of people come to the track on those big days that may not have before. And those are always my biggest fears, because if something happens on a person's first time at the track, it's going to be the end of it. But if you can, get through those days and really work hard to get them back into it, or get them into it, and realize how much horses love to do what they do, it's really amazing. So this gives you an idea of where we are now. 2019, I would love to say 2019 was an odd year, but it was just a more publicized year, and it was a more condensed issue. So, I think, as you can see, we've really decreased our fatalities this year so far in racing. From December 26th to when we closed in January, we had 2 fatalities. Training, we're fairly consistent in training, but our total is definitely decreasing. And some will say, well, you're racing fewer horses, so of course your numbers are going to go down. Well, I can tell you in 2019, our racing fatality rate was 2.71. Our racing fatality rate for the first 6 months of the year is 0.4. So we are not only we are better than international levels. So I think that is showing just how much we can do with the tools we have and having veterinarians on the ground. We have a huge team of veterinarians. We at least have 1 to 2 vets on the grounds every day. More often, we have 4 to 5, which means we need to find those resources, those veterinarians, and it can't just be a warm body. It has to be someone who's good and qualified and can make tough decisions and work with the trainers, because, well, at times we end up at odds. We have to do it respectfully, and we have to be able to make the next decision the next day and work together on that. So how do you feel the association attending trainer relationship is?
Well, it was actually something that I was talking to Dr. Steed about just earlier. That relationship is very important to have with the association veterinarians, your regulatory veterinarians, your attending, and your trainer, because, again, you want everybody to understand we all have a mutual goal, and that's to run a sound, safe horse, healthy horse, and have as large a field size as possible to put on a good program. And having as much transparency and that open dialogue and that trust with each other. Listen, this is what we've been experiencing. These are the measures that we've taken. We feel very comfortable with our diagnostics, X, Y, and Z. We're comfortable moving forward. And so I feel that when a trainer does diagnostics, you want trainers to do diagnostics. As an association vet, as a trainer, you don't want an association vet to hold those diagnostics against you. Okay, you want them to look at it and go, these guys are doing their due diligence, and that's where I feel the association vets and the attending and the trainer just need that cordial relationship instead of the adversary, because we all have that mutual goal, and to get to that mutual goal, we need to work together.
So, understanding that you are certainly a trainer who's willing to do those things, what do you say to trainers who think that this whole program is unneeded?
Well, if you feel that it's unneeded, then I might have to move out of California, because if we go back prior to our changes, then I think our industry will twilight, because the public pressure isn't going to be acceptable, and Sacramento would eventually make changes to our program. So that would be it in short.
Yeah, and so I know there are still areas we have issues and struggles with sudden death, which we'll talk about in the next panel, shoulder fractures or humeral stress fractures. And I know we've started to introduce or the CHRB has started to introduce some rules around trying to look at horses sooner and more often. And I know you guys are very diligent about requesting exams, because horses that have been off more than 90 days are required to have a series of exams when they come back to training and racing. What more do you think we should be doing?
I'd have to leave that to the professionals.
Damn it, I was looking for ideas.
Yeah, looking for ideas. I do feel very fortunate. We have Dr. Stover out in California that has just done an amazing job for us. The amount of information that she provides for our CE. Shoulder humeral fractures obviously are very concerning for a trainer. You don't get many do-overs. So we look at horses and we'll go, okay, this is the golden period when they're most likely to sustain one of these. And that's the protocols that Santa Anita, California has in place, that we have these checks as soon as they come into training, and 30 days later, 60 days, to see if we can identify anything that might be coming our way. Because unless you do nuke scans, on day 1, day 30, day 60, you may not find them. You'll find them when the horse is injured.
So what I find really interesting about that statement is you say you need an expert, but you just basically gave the expert answer, which is this is how, when you need to look at the horse, this is what you're looking for. And so I find it heartening to know that, the education that has been done and the regulations that have been enforced, you have that understanding of why they are there. And, I think you don't give yourself enough credit for understanding why or understanding the whys of what we're doing, what we are.
Right. Yeah. But that being said, I appreciate that. But, sometimes trainers, as myself, will rely too much on, this horse fits the criteria for a shoulder. Well, that's not always the case. Mm-hmm. I went through a span just recently, end of March to the beginning of May, where I had horse trot off, didn't look right, send it back to the barn, sound. Did it again, send it back to the barn, and we're just saying, just subtle, but did a nuke scan. And this is a horse that had been racing continuous, didn't fall into that bracket, but we had the nuke scan, the modality available, and the horse came up with a shoulder. Mm-hmm. And, it happened to me a couple times in a really short span. So, that's from my standpoint, this is where, I would like to get an understanding, why are these horses that are actually racing fit all of a sudden sustaining that, Now, is there something new that I need to be concerned about? Because I've profiled that type of injury, because as a trainer, you try and gain some confidence that, we're generally looking at a lower limb, and not at the shoulder when they're at certain points in their career. Mm-hmm. But that's actually not the case. So constantly learning.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's interesting because, you tell me you've got a couple shoulders, and we as the track don't know that. So it would be interesting to know how many other people out there are diagnosing those or stopping on horses or backing off horses because they're concerned about it, that fit into that mold, that we don't understand that whatever is going on might be a risk factor. So those are the unknowns. It's scary.
Those are the unknowns that are scary, but I think we have all that information available to us now, and now it's just a matter of extrapolating it. I think you call it equitabs, is that correct?
Yeah.
Right. Now, start pulling that information out. We did a nuke scan on the horse, this is the diagnosis, and you can start developing trends, patterns, try and get a better understanding of the direction and what might be taking place.
Yeah, I absolutely think that probably is the next kind of step we have to take as an industry and make sure we can figure out a little more predictive. And in the last panel, they were talking about the entry reviews, right? So we have an entry review panel, or what was called the Blue Ribbon Panel in California, that started in late 2019, which basically goes through all of the entries. Did you feel like there was apprehension about it when it started, that we would be scratching a bunch of horses? And
I would say that there was big apprehension about it because, one, we didn't know what the qualifying parameters would be. But I think as a horseman, it was very logical. On some of the horses that were flagged, there were good reasons on why they were flagged. And, if your horse is healthy, and what you want to do is you want to be proactive. If you know your horse is going to be suspect to being flagged by the panel, contact the association vet or the track vet. How do I make sure that I'm qualified, that my horse isn't going to get pulled out by the panel, so I don't run into any roadblocks when I'm ready to run?
yeah, and I think that's a great way to use that tool, is to really be proactive, because as we do our panel exams, and as Dr. Grande does the actual analysis of which horses are going to get looked at, one of the things he looks at is how recent an exam was and whether the association vet felt the horse was sound. So, I mean, that is a great way, and if the nationwide panel comes to pass, I think that's something that other trainers across the country can really take from your experience, which is, there is a way to use your association and regulatory vets to your benefit and really get information in front of that panel much earlier. So I think that is a really great way to look at it. I mean, I think we still, as regulatory vets and association vets, get some grief, but I think most of the trainers who are astute pretty much can list the reasons we're there before we even get there, and they know that we're coming. So I think that's been a real great change in the way it's been perceived.
I think the culture has very much changed in California, very much so, in a positive way. I mean, I have to say I'm very proud of what my colleagues and what Santa Anita First Vet has been able to accomplish. We're very much on an island. California is very transparent. We get scrutinized for being innovative at times. Earlier, Dr. Parkin was talking about the claim rule, the void the claim.
Yeah.
Well, the scrutiny that California took for implementing that has, I felt, we're going to lose all these horses. But in all fairness, we didn't. And, that rule is now rolled from the west to the east. Yeah. And it's been a great rule that put in place. But it was a huge topic of conversation, and we received a lot of scrutiny on it.
Do you think that overall, from 2019 to today, there has been a significant negative impact in the horse population in California based on the rules?
A negative impact based on the rules? No, I think there are other contributing factors that would challenge us, and that's probably purse structure is a reflection of that more than anything. I don't think our rules are very workable, and I think the rest of the country is working under basically very similar rules to a certain extent, with just a little tweaking. And we want to continue to progress. If we don't embrace change, we're going to stay stagnant, and we won't progress.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, as a veterinarian and someone who cares about horse racing, I worry that the changes that we make in California will not go far enough. I mean, for example, in Florida, we've enforced in the last 8 months the same requirement of entry-based exams and pre-work exams for the private or attending veterinarians. And I can tell you, with just that change, our fatalities have dropped 40%. So, if I think we do these extra steps, they can pay off dividends that we don't even, that don't even cost any one person that much. I mean, I know you pay for every exam, but I think it's probably, in some cases, saved you money over doing, procedures that didn't need to be done.
I would agree in that. And the way I look at it is that by turning a horse out or by having the understanding of where your horse is at its current stage, is it time to give the horse a break? What you're developing is you're developing a healthier bench. So now those horses that are being given time off earlier than later are now coming back, and they're coming back healthier. You're getting more starts out of them. And you have this nice continuous bench of healthy horses and horses that are being spelled for a shorter period instead of a longer period. So your layup time is shorter because you're not pushing them to the point of where now, instead of needing 60 days, they're going to need 120 days.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things we'd hoped would happen is that horses would stay in training longer in their careers while taking, breaks and certainly staying healthy. And, horses that are out of racing cost money and they cost the industry starts and things like that. But long term, if you get them back, they're usually, as Tim Parkin indicated, they're safer horses the more starts they can make.
Yeah. And, the expensive part is getting your horse fit.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to take the time to do that. So, but that's, are you finding with the shoulder injuries, and that you are bringing them back differently? Are you bringing horses back slower? Are you...
with
with
my
horses
recent
that you're...
experience or just in general?
Or generally, the ones you're concerned about.
No, I think in general, I have always been very aware and of the likelihood of shoulders coming off of breaks. So I've always trained according to making sure that they had the foundation in them. But that's not to say, i.e. what I just articulated, that we're going to be fine and not get shoulders. Yeah. So, these horses, they were racing, they didn't fit that profile, but, you still will sustain, an array of injuries.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think, for me, the takeaways from what we've done is, as you indicated, the culture in California has really changed. I think that we have, by and large, a group of trainers who don't want to have injuries or fatalities. I think one of the interesting things is I've heard people say, I used to hold my breath when I'd watch racing, and now I can actually relax a little and enjoy it. I don't relax a little and enjoy it. That's not my job. But certainly I'm hoping that the average person who's not the veterinarian can enjoy it more than we did maybe 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. You as a trainer, as a racing fan, you always, a successful day at the races is a healthy day at the races. Mm-hmm. And, the sport is so much fun. That's why we're all in it. We all share that common interest, whether you're in the breeding end or whether you're in the racing end or whether you're in the betting end. And the sport's enjoyable when everybody comes back healthy.
Yeah, I think that's a great change. I don't know that 25 years ago that would have been the opinion. It would have been, did we win? Or even in some barns, that may not be the opinion. But I think overall in California, that is the opinion now. So I'm grateful to see that. Basically, as we said, I think the main things we've done are the increased in veterinary interventions, whether it be private or regulatory, improved diagnostic and surgery options for horses, and a culture change. It is truly my pleasure to work with the trainers at Santa Anita, because I feel like some days if I asked you to race backwards, you'd say, well, wait a minute, okay, but let's talk about it. Why do we want to do this? It's not the automatic, well, we're not doing that. We've never done that. And this is one of more of our Fat Like Arthur DC's horses, who was now takes autistic children for rides. So they have lots of jobs afterwards. So I'm very proud of that program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.